NBC Studios, Burbank. The hallway was silent. Elvis Presley stood frozen, 21 years old, the biggest name in music, just finished performing on the Steve Allen Show, just shaken the world. But right now, his hands were shaking for a different reason. Dean Martin was walking toward him. Cigarette in one hand, scotch in the other. That face, the one that made Hollywood kneel, completely relaxed, no hurry, never in a hurry. Elvis felt like a kid caught stealing, like he didn't belong, like any second Dean would see through him and know the truth, that Elvis Presley was drowning. Dean stopped 3 feet away, looked Elvis up and down, smiled that smile, the one that meant he'd already seen everything and nothing impressed him. And then Dean whispered something, 7 words, so quiet only Elvis could hear them. And what Dean Martin said in those 7 seconds made Elvis Presley cry in front of the entire crew. Not sad tears, something else, something deeper. Relief, recognition, permission. Let's rewind, because to understand why this moment shattered Elvis, you need to understand what June 5, 1956 meant to a kid from Mississippi who'd been famous for exactly 18 months. The breaking of Elvis Presley. Elvis Presley was drowning, not in poverty anymore, not in obscurity, in something worse, expectation. Every record executive in America wanted to control him. Every TV producer wanted to tame him. Every critic wanted to destroy him. Colonel Tom Parker, his manager, was turning him into a product. RCA was turning him into a brand. And Elvis, the real Elvis, the one who just wanted to sing gospel music with his mama, was disappearing. He'd been booked on the Steve Allen Show as a humiliation. Steve Allen thought rock and roll was a joke, thought Elvis was dangerous, thought he needed to be neutered for mainstream America. So he made Elvis wear a tuxedo, made him stand perfectly still, made him sing Hound Dog to an actual basset hound on national television. 40 million people watched. Elvis smiled through it. He had to. Colonel Parker told him, "Smile, boy. Don't give them a reason to hate you. Do what they say. Play the game. This is how you stay famous." But backstage, alone in his dressing room before the performance, Elvis had sat on the floor and cried. Not because of the dog, because he didn't recognize himself anymore. A stagehand heard him, told one person, that person told someone else. Word traveled fast in Hollywood. By the Elvis walked on stage, half the crew knew. The kid was breaking. The rebel everyone was afraid of was falling apart. And one person heard that rumor and decided to do something about it. Dean Martin. Dean Martin's decision. Dean Martin wasn't supposed to be at NBC that night. He was filming Hollywood or Bust across town, had a dinner meeting with Paramount executives, big money, big pressure. But Dean had heard something that made him change his plans. The kid's breaking, someone told him. Elvis, he's not going to make it. Dean didn't know Elvis personally. They'd never met, moved in different circles, different generations, different worlds. But Dean Martin knew what it felt like to be used. He'd spent 10 years being Jerry Lewis's straight man, the boring one, the guy who stood there while Jerry got all the laughs and all the credit. Everyone said Jerry was the talent. Dean was just the handsome face, the guy who could sing a little, nothing special. When Dean finally walked away from Jerry in 1956, walked away from the biggest comedy act in America, Hollywood said he'd made a mistake. Dean Martin is nothing without Jerry Lewis, Variety wrote. He'll be washed up in 6 months. Career suicide. But Dean proved them wrong, not by fighting, not by yelling, by simply being himself, unshakable, unfazed, unapologetically real. And when Dean heard that Elvis Presley, the kid everyone was trying to break, was performing at NBC that night, Dean made a decision. He was going to meet him. Dean watches from the shadows. Dean arrived at NBC Studios at 9:47 p.m., late as always. He walked past security like he owned the building. Nobody stopped Dean Martin. Nobody ever did. He found a spot in the wings, shadows, out of sight, and watched Elvis perform. What he saw wasn't a rebel.
It was a hostage, Elvis in a tuxedo, standing stiff, singing to a dog while the audience laughed. The studio had neutered him, turned danger into comedy, and Elvis played along because he didn't know he had a choice. But Dean saw something else. The way Elvis's voice broke on certain notes, not from nervousness, from soul. The way his eyes scanned the crowd, looking for one person who understood. The way he gripped the microphone like it was the only real thing in the room. Dean thought, this kid's got it, and they're going to destroy him if someone doesn't tell him the truth. After the show, Elvis was surrounded. Producers shaking his hand, photographers snapping pictures, Colonel Parker already steering him toward the exit, toward the next thing, the next city, the next performance. Elvis smiled, waved, said, "Thank you, sir," 40 times, but his eyes were empty. Dean watched from across the hallway. He took a slow drag from his cigarette, sipped his scotch. And then he did what Dean Martin always did when everyone else was moving fast. He waited. 10 minutes later, the crowd thinned. Elvis was standing alone near his dressing room door, holding his jacket, staring at nothing. That's when Dean moved. Not fast, never fast. He just started walking, slow, deliberate. A producer saw Dean coming and started to intercept. "Mr. Martin, if you'd like to meet Elvis, we can arrange." Dean didn't even look at him, just kept walking. The producer stepped aside. The meeting. Elvis didn't notice Dean at first. He was lost in his own head, replaying the performance, wondering if he'd embarrassed himself, wondering if this was what his career would be from now on. Then he felt it, that presence, the kind that changes the air in a room. He looked up. Dean Martin, 3 feet away. Cigarette smoke curling around that famous face, that slight smile, those eyes that had seen everything and been impressed by nothing. Elvis's first instinct was to extend his hand, be polite, say something clever, but his hand wouldn't move. He just stood there, frozen, staring at the man every singer in America wanted to be. Dean didn't say hello, didn't introduce himself. He just looked at Elvis for a long moment, really looked at him, and then spoke, quiet, calm. "You okay, kid?" Elvis blinked. Yes, sir, thank you. Dean held up a hand, not aggressive, just stop. "Don't thank me, I didn't do anything." Silence. Dean took another drag. "You know what I saw out there tonight?" Elvis swallowed. "A joke, I know, the dog. I saw a kid trying to make everyone happy." Dean's voice was soft, but it cut. "And that's going to kill you." Elvis's breath caught. Dean stepped closer, close enough that Elvis could smell the scotch, the cigarette smoke, the confidence. And then Dean said the thing, the 7 words that would haunt Elvis Presley for the rest of his life. The 7 words. Dean leaned in, whispered, "You're better than all of us. Don't let them change you." Silence. Elvis stood there, completely still, as those words sank in. "You're better than all of us." Not "you're good," not "keep working," not "listen to your manager." "You're better than all of us." From Dean Martin, the man who didn't give compliments, the man who didn't need anyone's approval, The man who walked away from the biggest comedy act in America because he refused to be anyone but himself. And then the second part hit. Don't let them change you. Elvis felt something break inside, not in a bad way, in the way a dam breaks when the pressure finally becomes too much. His eyes filled with tears. He tried to speak. I don't know how to... Dean put a hand on his shoulder, firm, steady. You do know. You knew before they got to you. You knew when you were singing in church. You knew when you recorded That's All Right. You knew who you were before they told you who to be. A tear rolled down Elvis's face. He didn't try to hide it. But they're going to fire me if I don't... Then let them fire you. Dean's voice was gentle but absolute. Dean's story. Kid, I walked away from Jerry Lewis. You know what everyone said?
Elvis shook his head. That I'd be broke in 6 months. That I was nothing without him. That I made the biggest mistake of my career. Elvis was listening now. Really listening. But you know what I did? Dean smiled. I played golf. I sang songs I wanted to sing. I made movies I wanted to make. I didn't beg. I didn't apologize. I just kept being me. He squeezed Elvis's shoulder. And I'm still here. Elvis wiped his eyes, laughed, a real laugh, not a performer's laugh. It made me sing to a dog tonight. I know. And you did it with more class than they deserved. Pause. I hated it. Good. Dean dropped his cigarette, crushed it under his shoe. Don't ever forget that feeling. That's your compass. When you hate what you're doing, you're going the wrong way. Elvis nodded slowly, like the words were rewiring something inside him. Mr. Martin? Dean. Dean, can I ask you something? Shoot. How do you do it? How do you just not care what people think? Dean smiled, that famous lazy smile. Who says I don't care? Elvis blinked. I care about the people who matter. My family, my friends, people who see me, not the act. Pause. But critics, producers, guys in suits who think they own me? Dean shrugged. They don't get a vote. He lit another cigarette. Kid, here's the secret. Hollywood doesn't respect you because you're talented. Talent's cheap. They respect you when you respect yourself, when you know your worth and don't negotiate it. Elvis's transformation. Elvis Presley walked out of NBC Studios that night a different person. Not louder, not bolder, quieter, clearer. 3 months later, when Ed Sullivan tried to censor Elvis's performance, Elvis pushed back, not by yelling, by refusing to compromise. Shoot me from the waist up if you want, but I'm singing my way. Sullivan agreed. When Colonel Parker tried to put Elvis in 10 B movies a year, Elvis said no, not to all of them, but to the ones that felt wrong. I'm not doing it just for the money anymore. Parker was furious, but Elvis didn't budge. And when reporters asked Elvis who he looked up to in Hollywood, he didn't say James Dean or Marlon Brando. He said Dean Martin. Dean taught me that you don't have to fight the system. You just have to know who you are and never apologize for it. 1969, the comeback. Years later, 1969, Elvis was opening his comeback special in Las Vegas. Backstage before he went on, he was nervous. It had been years since he'd performed live. The critics said he was washed up, that the world had moved on. Someone knocked on Elvis's dressing room door. Elvis opened it. Dean Martin, cigarette, scotch, that smile. You ready, kid? I don't know. What if I bomb? Dean looked at him, dead serious. Then you bomb as Elvis Presley, not as what they want you to be. Elvis nodded, took a breath, and went out and gave the performance of his life. The note. When Elvis died in 1977, they found a note in Elvis's Graceland bedroom, handwritten, framed. It said, "You're better than all of us. Don't let them change you. Dean." Nobody in Elvis's family knew where it came from, but they kept it, because whoever Dean was, Elvis had carried those words with him for 21 years. Dean's silence. Dean Martin never talked about that night at NBC. When reporters asked him about Elvis, he'd smile and say, "Great kid, hell of a singer." That was it. Because that's who Dean was. He didn't take credit, didn't need the story. He just did what felt right and moved on. But the people who were there that night, the stagehand, the crew, the producer who saw Elvis crying, they never forgot. "I saw Dean Martin save Elvis Presley," one of them said years later. Not from dying, from disappearing. The legacy. This wasn't a story about fame. It was a story about identity. Elvis Presley was the biggest star in the world, but he was losing himself. And Dean Martin, the man who refused to be anything but real, saw it. He didn't give Elvis advice about singing or performing.
He gave him permission to be himself, to walk away from what didn't fit, to stop apologizing for being different. And that's the legacy Dean Martin left, not in movies or songs, in moments like this, quiet, private, unrehearsed. 7 words that changed a life. You're better than all of us. Don't let them change you. The lesson. If you want to live like Dean Martin, fearless, free, unapologetically real, start by asking yourself one question. Who am I when nobody's watching? And then be that person, always, because the coolest thing you can be isn't famous. It's yourself.